All right. Should be good to go here.
All right, so I'd like to officially call the November Camden Conservation Commission meeting to order at 12:12. The first order of business on the agenda is to review and approve the minutes for the October 25th meeting. Does anybody have any edits, well, not so much updates, edits or amendments to the minutes? As I was not there, I do not. I didn't see any glaring typos, so.
I can't open it, so I'll try. I should ask Pamela, maybe she'll help me.
Okay. Ryan, did you have any?
I couldn't open it for some reason.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't open it.
It was like,
It just said my computer. I don't know.
Oh, Samantha, were you able to see the minutes?
I was. I don't know why.
Additions, subtractions?
She wasn't here.
Oh, so this is the one where I did get a notification that said couldn't preview file. When I clicked on it, it gives you the option to download it. So I downloaded it and then I opened it from my downloads folder. So it may have caused some issues there. I'm very persistent.
Thank you, Samantha. It was a fairly small meeting because you weren't here and Dave wasn't here.
yeah,
And
it was small.
It was a very
Samantha-
chatty meeting.
Samantha wasn't here.
Yeah.
I was here.
Yeah, no, it was great because we got a lot of information.
It was a good meeting.
Allison.
Yep,
So,
productive.
yeah.
And I did do what I said I would do afterwards. So.
Of course you did.
Well, but you did not follow up in 4 days with a harassment notification as you're supposed to.
All right.
Anyone see anything
So-
about it? I don't know.
Yes.
But I did it anyway.
Yeah, you did it anyway. I figured you would.
But sometimes they don't. So next time that somebody signs up to remind Allison in 4 days, they should
She
do
spends
it.
a lot of time watching soap operas and stuff. She's just sitting around all the time, Allison.
Did I tell you that how addicted I am to, that's true. I
Don't believe that.
Colombian Spanish language soap operas. I was just telling somebody whatever, I had to
I didn't even know they
stop.
still existed, to be honest with you.
No.
Okay, all right, circling back. So seeing that no one has any edits, or Samantha didn't say any glaring typos, I would, is there a motion to accept the minutes of the October 25th meeting?
Well, can I do that? Because I wrote them, but I
You
think
can.
someone else should do it.
I think you
Make
can.
a motion to accept the minutes.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Ooh, excellent. Good job. Okay. So based on the meeting minutes and the fact that I wasn't at the last meeting, I'd like to do the town department updates, obviously. If David isn't able to appear momentarily for his update, we'll get.
Is he supposed to come?
I did not hear from him. But we'll get Allison's for sure. And then I really just wanted to circle back. There were a lot of moving parts and a lot of opportunities that came up in the October meeting. So that's why the agenda sort of looks a little like it does, as it were. Sort of felt like there was a lot to address. So one thing I added was an update on the NOAA grant for the watershed. I just hadn't heard anything lately and thought maybe if you had anything to share, that would be a good time to see what's happened and what we're looking forward to for 2024.
Yeah, actually, that had we had a little bit more time just a minute ago, that was one of the things I was gonna run by you, but I'll just mention it to the whole group. One of the things that was included in the NOAA NIFWIF grant, that's the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Coastal resilience grant looking at the watershed and reducing flooding and increasing fish passage. One of the things was a three-dimensional watershed model, sort of $25,000 or so buried in there, not buried, but a smaller sub-grant on a much larger $1.6 million award. And FB Environmental has been they are the major sort of overseers of the grant along with Interfluve. So FB Environmental's been doing the Cook River Citizens Advisory Committee, working with that group, and kind of overseeing the public engagement part of this, collecting information. And then apparently somewhere along, sort of independently of knowing that this was budgeted for in the grant, there's been a lot of enthusiasm about creating a three-dimensional watershed model. So we were on the right track putting that in the grant. But the organization Stewardship Education Alliance, and Barbara Lawrence, along with, I believe there's some overlapping board members.
I'm on that board.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And I was just gonna mention, because we talked about the 3D.
It's been like a 5-year dream of Barbara's, apparently.
We talked about that in our the meeting before then.
Yes, I believe it. I talked to Barbara the other day too.
Right.
And Courtney Cease approached me about it. She's on the Citizen Advisory Committee, and I think she's also part of C somehow. Is she on an advisory board or
Yeah,
something?
she might be an advisor that I don't.
Anyway, she said that she was working on that as part of the committee and with C, and trying to bring the high school hatchery program into that, designing something. And I said, oh, whoa, that's great. There's actually a budget, and Knox Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District helped us develop when we were applying for the grant. I ran this by Rebecca. They have this watershed model that is not,
It's very rudimentary.
right.
But
And just to teach people watershed concepts, but nothing specific to our watershed. And so I'm glad there's enthusiasm for this, and we should check in with them too, because they were the ones that wrote the letter of support for our grant, saying that they would, partner with us and sort of be the quality control or help us come up with a plan. So it had an initial meeting with Danny Solomon from the hatchery program. He has been working with Courtney Cease some through, there's a climate group, what's that called, BD, that?
Camden Can.
No.
It's not another one.
Jess Scott's, the one that Jess and Amanda do.
Oh, that's the sort of evening conversation.
Oh, the happy hour, Mid-Coast Climate Happy Hour.
Yeah. Anyway, so we had initially started talking with Danny there. Danny does the radical reuse program, really great at the high school. And he also apparently, I think he's a trained architect. He builds models. So the high school, and along with another teacher, Jude Mazur, who used to teach at the Watershed School and now teaches research at the high school, they're kind of teaming up to want to build a model and do associated research. So, oh my gosh, is that Esperanza?
Yeah, come on in. Come on
Pull it, come on in, just
in.
pull that.
she can't get in.
I think she's,
Yes.
oh, right.
Hey there.
Hey there, I'm supposed to be here, sorry, I don't want to crash your meeting.
No,
We're supposed to have a meeting here too,
Oh,
for CCAN.
we'd love to have you in our meeting.
Oh, I'd love to be here, but,
But not today, yeah.
sorry, thanks for letting me in, I have no idea what we're supposed to be here.
to make a long story short, there's like so many groups excited about a watershed model. And Barbara Lawrence called me saying that she kind of had it all figured out with these AutoCAD files and some friend of hers, and very excited about 3D printing something. She said she had spoken to you also, Rebecca, at some point years ago. Or,
Yeah, many topics.
and I said, oh yeah, I've also talked to Rebecca about watershed models. And Danny in the high school program, they're not, from what I understood, not into 3D printing. There's a different process. And I think maybe once they realized there was a possible budget for it, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between what Barbara was thinking and what the high school is thinking. But all like variations of the same goal. I also said, oh, the Conservation Commission I know is probably interested too, and we have Rebecca's the chair of that. So the long story is that I said we need to make sure that anything that happens with that money is something that Knox Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District feels good about and can help, because that's what we put in the grant, and everybody was like, oh, that's great. And so maybe there are going to be multiple models. Maybe we should, anybody that's interested, we could talk about that more.
I used to do ones with kids, and I'll talk to Alfie at middle school if this is going to happen, because you can do very simple boxes with papier-mâché. You can do a watershed.
Yeah, and Alfie's part of C too, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are a lot of different ways that this could happen with different levels of budgets. You know, that Enviroscape thing is really cool.
I think two of the big questions for me are, one, are we going to do one model, and then having a consensus as to what, how it would be fabricated, and by whom, because the cost levels or the community involvement levels will be different, and not necessarily right or wrong, but just different. And two, where is it going to be? Like, what is the scale that we're going to work towards? Like a tabletop, like a room size? Think about going to Acadia.
These are all the same questions that Danny feels are like the major
I think
things
there's
to find.
some really key baseline questions, and like, is it going to be, and this is Rebecca's just off the cuff, so there's no consensus for this, but like the room to the, that sort of empty, I call it like the empty room to the right of the Opera House entrance. It's not always empty, but like the little lobby space, is it going to be like there and like open during town hours?
So all of these things.
Like, is it going to be outside in a?
Barbara wants there to be 3, and she feels that was already agreed on in some kind of a
3 of them?
meeting. Yes. I think what's really clear from talking is that there are a lot of hopes and dreams, and it might be impossible for one project to meet everybody's.
For sure.
And that it might be good to, I was trying to get Barbara if she feels that she has files that could just be printed almost, that might be a good.
Or share digitally, but.
Yeah, she was a little hesitant to share those. Colton's father has a company that does 3D printing and does LiDAR and, like tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment. And I was just maybe gonna try to see what the baseline would be if we just wanted to print something sort of generic, and then maybe building from there some of these other smaller projects where you wanna have 3 different models, or I love the idea of like, the kids could build something with Legos based on something else. But
I do think it's important that we probably have a separate meeting, and we invite, as crazy and as all over the place as the first one might be, it will hopefully, or build a survey, write like the Survey Monkey, whatever, but do some sort of quick questionnaire and put it to everybody, and then start building some level of consensus, because otherwise, C has the right to make a model on their own if they want to, but like, what are the goals and the outcomes?
Right, and what,
From a
some of
town
that doesn't need to
perspective.
happen with the grant, it was kind of like Barbara felt that she almost had a plan ready to go, and then the introduction of money maybe made it like, I don't think she has money to offer to it, but through the grant, I was invited to a meeting which already had multiple people about this model. It was right here. And I was like, oh, okay, well, which it seems like the quality, FB is overseeing sort of the entire grant.
Mhm.
And so that would fall some under them. I think the next step would be to have you talk to Forrest at FB or Dina, one of them, and figure out how involved you and the Conservation District want to be with their plan, or should we split up a little bit of money, or should we, one thing we talked about was giving the Conservation District a little bit of money to help with some sort of,
Yeah,
anyway, I think there are a lot of ways to accomplish it. I think we might want to like allow different groups to work on it almost simultaneously or something. Barbara's vision of it, the whole thing sounded very similar to my personal vision of what I kind of wanted to do, but I also told her that there's a lot of enthusiasm from the high school
For a
and
meeting with Esperanza?
Yes.
she was that way and
She
didn't
went that way,
back,
this is
so,
the Conservation Commission, but you can walk her.
so I didn't want to stifle the good progress being made by, FB seems to have done these models kind of before some too. Danny has a lot of experience with it, and so it didn't seem to me like Danny in the high school program would necessarily benefit tremendously from a lot of micromanagement from like me and saying this is what my vision is, or maybe even Barbara's vision. None of us seem to know very much about 3D printing, even though Barbara's, very much was talking about 3D printing. We're gonna get this, we have the files to get it printed. I asked her, what files do you have that are not like publicly available? So anyway, that's a very messy update to know that there's enthusiasm and there's money, but there's not one consolidated plan. It would probably be a good time for you to get involved, Rebecca.
okay.
In so much as you want to be. So that's the, and then overall the NOAA grant, the Citizens Advisory Committee continues to meet. They've been collecting public input. I believe that they are now opening their meetings up to, at the end, they're reserving a time where people can provide public input. It would be, I think this is one of those things where there's a committee that's looking at things and they're all really focused on it and their meetings have been open to the public and they're thinking about it a lot. Probably gonna get nearer to the end and people are gonna be like, oh, I didn't get a chance to give input, so now is the time for people to provide broad input. These are the types of things I want the committee to be thinking about. These are, they did a survey and they only got like 300 and some responses. I know that I personally missed that deadline because I thought it wasn't a serious deadline, maybe, I guess. I'm sure a lot of others
I
did.
responded.
I did too.
Oh, good for you guys. So, but it would be, this is the kind of thing where most people don't provide like broad general input on things. They provide like, I heard this one thing and it upset me. And then they provide input then, but they don't say, I generally support the types of conversations I'm hearing in these meetings, or, I really hope the committee is focusing on thinking about public access and conservation best practices when you're going to make your recommendations, or, that's more important to me than preserving such and such a thing, or preserving something is more important to me than this. Would be a good time to, do that kind of thing. I believe that they're still hoping that we'll get ready for like a November of next year vote.
There was a scheduling conflict, but not a.
No, they're coming in
I think
our
it's just that
door.
they all say-
It's the next door and they're in there. But this, you can go through here.
That we would be ready for some form of vote in November on something related to that, maybe on the Montgomery Dam or on something related to the project. So, but that, that funding source continues to be like a big opportunity for us and probably for other, related projects as well, because the whole watershed that empties into Camden Harbor is, Camden Harbor is kind of connected to the whole McGonagall watershed. I've also been told in the past that other, little projects close by, like in Daly Brook, might also qualify for that. State could be pulled into that same group of
I think
funding.
Jeremy's meeting with the people who've been coming through now about public landing.
Oh, yeah, then there's that
I
too.
think that's what's going. Everybody's.
The one big thing is trying to decide whether they were considering applying for funding to remove the Knowlton Street and Knox Mill dams, because there's funding available right now. That Knowlton Street dam has an impoundment that is the biggest of all of them, really, except for the lake, and those dams aren't getting removed. But there's so much trapped sediment behind the Knowlton Street Dam that that has been a problem for the town in the past. In the 90s, a study was done about the sources of sedimentation of the McGonagall River, because you can see it all builds up in that island kind of behind by Bella Point.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes this island that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then every so often, according to newspaper reports, like in the 80s, the island, this like sandbar, gets washed down into the harbor.
On top of the dam.
Yeah, because it's filled up, or somebody has opened up that gate in the past and it's released a bunch, or it also, like the dam itself is in really poor condition, and so eventually that's gonna breach. The dam is eventually gonna get a hole in it, and we're gonna not be able to control the migration of the sediment.
Is that one of the privately owned ones?
It is,
Yeah.
with a supportive property owner too.
Yeah, no, I knew that, yeah.
And who was looking at getting this?
So FB had asked the committee to look at whether they should apply for an actual implementation grant. And the committee basically said yes, but then it was considered like, oh, is it gonna be thought that we're moving too fast? And I think some people answer that, that question differently. But from a Conservation Commission standpoint, thinking about that whole impoundment of being something that's gonna have to be dealt with eventually, because nobody's ever gonna like it when massive amounts of sediment all of a sudden get washed out into the harbor during a storm. And that's what will happen if we don't do it proactively. So the grant would allow us, millions of dollars to remove sediment proactively, to have that section of the river look more like below the Seabright Dam along the river
Like
walk
a
there,
river.
or the tannery. That's what.
I was out there this weekend, and it looks like there's a beaver dam behind that. There's a beaver lodge, and there's a bunch of beaver. So the only reason I'm bringing that up is because that's another risk, that whole thing could breach. It's entirely flooded behind the school. If you go down that embankment, it's like a pond.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Oh, and most of that, it is like that, even without that beaver dam.
Yeah, well, anyway.
I took pictures of the beaver dam the other day.
Did you?
Yeah, and actually, they used to trap the beavers there. I think that practice is gonna cease now, but,
Where do you go down to see that?
well, it's really very difficult because we haven't created the
It's
river
steep.
walk. And that's one of the things holding up the Riverwalk is all of that flooded wetland kind of area. So you can go down behind the school.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
The beaver's just down there behind the school.
Well, if you go
There's a
down,
lodge that's on the wastewater treatment plant
yeah,
property,
right.
and then the dam that they've done pretty well right now. It got washed out, and then they're rebuilding. Yeah, there's a beaver dam there, but there's also a fence. This is another quick Conservation Commission sort of related thing. The whole wastewater treatment plant is encompassed in a fence, and
Is encompassed what?
in a fence with barbed wire. It's like 3 acres. And as part of the upgrades, the planning board, in their site plan approval, said that they recommended that the fence be removed for the purpose of pedestrian and wildlife passage. It's barbed wire, goes all the way down, like into the water, but then if you're on the river, you can just like go wherever you want. So they're supposed to be working on only fencing off the dangerous parts of the treatment plant and then letting people get through there, which would also open up the Riverwalk extension. All of that's part of the conversation with the, wetland restoration, and that would all be part of this grant, the NOAA grant, as part of the Knowlton Street dam removal. So that's just something to watch out for.
It would make a lot of sense to do some sediment control.
Absolutely.
It's also just broken glass and junk out there, and it's a mess.
My dad has property right at the bend there across from them. And it's like the section of river, it's turning brown, very, very brown every time it rains. Where's
it coming from?
It's coming from the Lupin Terrace subdivision partially, which is another thing that could be addressed with the grant because of it's a tributary stream. And so there's restoration of that tributary stream, and the outfall from the subdivision could be covered under the grant, where really all as part of the Knowlton Street dam removal could, because you would want to mitigate the sources of sedimentation as part of that dam removal project, along with the recreational part, which would be the Riverwalk. It would be it's always been like the most expensive possible part of this whole river restoration, but
Is Lupin Terrace?
Part of it could be because that tributary stream that goes in by the pump station on Rawson Avenue, the Rawson Avenue pump station is actually flooding too. Sometimes water's coming in to it from the emergency outfall in the river. But anyway, it's all connected there, and as part of, if it's all tied into river restoration, we can fund many aspects of that whole thing.
Yeah, isn't the Lupin Terrace people somewhat liable for some of this damage?
Yeah.
I mean, why should the town have to take responsibility for it?
It's kind of complicated. It goes along with all of the other subdivisions that we have. That particular one was an affordable housing project that the town was heavily involved in. I think that there could be a benefit to funding it with grant money, especially if it opens up. There's a pedestrian path that goes along that little stream there. It's always been envisioned as part of like a larger pedestrian connectivity plan between the Cobb Hill subdivisions and stuff on that side. That stream is actually supports like brook trout. It's pretty cold. It's a cool little stream that is kind of more than the subdivision realized it was, and it's eroding things, and it's not really their fault at this point. They didn't know about one of the outfalls, and they've been taking really good care of everything else. And this is
heavier rains now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's changed. I just want to say, out west, when they're trying to get beavers in, they're using artificial beaver kind of enforcements, and then beavers can kind of hang on, and they're not as worried about them being washed out when there's a really big downpour. And I don't know whether anybody in Maine is thinking about using beavers to, I don't know if you want to slow things down there, but
No, we really,
it seems like they are part of the, the river's trying to do something, the beaver's trying to do something with it.
yeah, I mean, it's a great way to teach people about how dams cause flooding. The thing about the beavers is their dams don't last forever, and that's better usually for and fish can oftentimes get around them, and the beavers probably will we haven't had any trouble with the beavers coming back. They've come back on their own, really.
You said something.
They're cutting down all the trees.
Washing out.
What's that?
You said something earlier about worrying about them washing out.
Oh, well, what happens some is that, so that you can get like a couple feet from the dam that they have now, which actually has been partially breached, but it causes, actually at Tricia's house, the person who's, it floods their property, and others. So there are mixed feelings about the beavers, but then if it does wash out, then you do get a little bit more water downstream. Yeah, there are a lot of beavers back there. And I'm excited that they're not gonna trap them anymore, because they were letting a private trapper trap.
Not fair.
I've had dead beaver wash up at my dad's house, and I don't know how we like the beavers personally, but, anyway.
All right, well, I'm glad I brought it up. So
Sorry.
a lot of moving
You should
parts.
just stop me.
No, I'm tying it up now. So I think we'll move on to just mentioning the select board member appointments is that Samantha Sharp still needs to be officially appointed. That we're very happy to have her attending meetings, and it's just a formality at this point to get the select board to officially sign her on. And then that I will follow up with Trish, who was in fact put on the Conservation Commission at the last, or 2 meetings ago for the select board. So now, because I missed the last meeting, I just wasn't aware and wanted to follow up. So I will reach out to her and make sure she knows when the meetings are, and hope to see her in the months to come.
And then also telling in the email about Samantha Sharp, we want to say that you had already followed up with Kayla, and that she had said she wasn't.
Oh, yeah, no, and I will let,
interested,
yeah,
so
Janice.
They really should Kayla should be substituted for Samantha.
Agreed, yeah, and that I'd already followed up with all of the others. Trish not being one of them, either she didn't call me back, or she.
No, I think she was newer than the ones.
Or she was post the pile that I had received, so there was just a little miscommunication there.
None of which was your fault, but we're sorry.
It's all good. So we'll, because David's not here, we'll skip the Public Works update and head into the sort of follow-up on October meeting topics, of which there were I felt like there were a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that would happen going forward that the Conservation Commission could either assist with or, appropriately at the right time and place weigh in on. So in no particular order, I had shoreline zoning. So shoreline zoning being something that we've talked about in general, but also in response to the bullet point below that on the agenda, which was the limitations that are currently in place due with lack of additional shoreline zoning ordinances that are localized, not just generalized to state and federal. So the tree poisoning adjacent to Lake Beach, and other impacts that if we have boosted our shoreline zoning with definitive vegetated buffer zones, or we addressed pesticide use, you know, with some exception of others, you know, and, you know, so the discussion is really sort of, you know, Jeremy has openly stated that what we had was perhaps not sufficient to address current past concerns within the shoreline zone, and that if we buoyed what we had, so what role can we play? Are we willing to pull some models, some model ordinances from other towns and
Maybe
see
that's
how we
something we
can
can do.
adapt?
Each of us this month can like maybe try to find some other examples that we can bring.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I've got a couple that I've been working with, and so I'll pull those back out and see what we can stitch
You
together.
can share with us, and then the rest of us can all, like, see if we can find a few examples of shorelines and things, and then we can.
Yeah, because these are the sort of task-oriented things, like Barb and I were talking prior to the meeting starting, we're just like, let's find one or two things that either each of us or we can collectively to do and bring to the next meeting to just kind of keep things moving forward. I think a winter, getting something like shoreline zoning in place and then would be a super winter project.
I think Jeremy, well, you know, Jeremy has opinions on.
Oh, yeah, no, there's not in a vacuum by any stretch.
Yeah.
This is meant to be completely open with Jeremy and Shenley and the select board. There's no,
We've talked about this for a while.
nothing behind the scenes. Just, this is actually a result of me listening to 20 minutes of the select board meeting and Jeremy, and talking with Jeremy about a few other shoreline concerns that came through the soil water district. And so I was like, oh, okay, there's just like all of these different layers. And really, you know, Camden gets the opportunity to model better best practices in the mid-coast. And then what we've learned and put together here as a group, we can just share with other towns. You know, that's the whole point, is to just do what we're doing better and then to move it along. So I think it would be,
Then there's just watching out what's happening like across from.
So,
yeah,
pardon me for being pedantic, but
no, it's okay.
Maine has extensive shoreline zoning ordinances, right? There's state ordinances for shoreline zoning and shoreline buffer and all the things you can do and you can't do, right? Does Camden not use the Maine?
So, yeah, you're required by law, but remember
Yeah.
that what the state and federal regulations are
Mhm.
bare minimums.
Yeah.
And they're bare minimums, and there's a lot of sort of, I would say, gray areas or areas of interpretation. So
Room for
what,
improvement.
room for
Yeah.
improvement.
It's just really not as protective as anybody imagines that it is.
No,
No,
and even
it's really
DEP
not.
and EPA would agree with that. But, you know, they're bound by these, it's, you know, in order for them to update or redo that would be Herculean, right? So what we can do from a political and you know, on a local level, is that we can add to. So you can't take away from, right? You have to do the state and federal. It's, you know, the top down. But what we can do is enhance and target through, we have very specialized soils, right? Or lack thereof, you know, and the coast, which is not the same as even inland Maine, right? So what our localized ordinances for shoreline do that would superimpose on top of, you know, and enhance, and it may not be relevant for, you know, inland Maine, but, you know, it might be very relevant for other coastal regions. So what we would be doing is saying, you know, the severity of slope that we have, for example, from the high water to actual, you know, buildable land, you know, is substantial. Like we have steep shorelines, right?
Yeah.
And so we know, hey Dave, so we know that, you know, when you're talking about sediment erosion control, the bigger the buffer you have, the better. But it's even more imperative when you have a steeper slope.
Right.
So is, you know, the 250 or the 50 or the 75 or which, you know, whichever when you're thinking, sufficient, maybe it's not sufficient, or you can remove so much vegetation. Maybe we say you have to remove less, you can remove less vegetation, or for every one tree removed, you must put 2 or 3 trees back, you know, there's.
Yeah, all right.
So there's.
So we had a place on a pond in Western Maine, and everybody got the shoreline zoning handbook.
Yeah.
It was a handbook, and you were bound to abide by the rules of and it was really constraining what you could do and what you couldn't do, right? So, I mean, I guess I can go dig it up, by the way.
That'd be great, do that.
Yeah, I mean, if,
Roger
but,
Rittmaster.
what's that?
Did you ever meet Roger Rittmaster? He
Yeah.
was on the C before you, and he put together something with the Conservation Commission. That was his big thing.
Is this
More like
thing?
On this, up top?
Yeah,
And it wasn't just shoreland on a lake, it was shoreland on a river, shoreland on a water thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I get it. I guess, I'm just surprised we don't have anything in town. We have, like, it would be nice if we had a booklet or something, even with the state ordinances in it, that people, because I suspect that people just don't even.
Well, once we get this done, maybe we can.
Oblivious to
Another
it.
thing that can have states say this, and then on top of that,
Yeah,
the town says this.
incremental
It's-
stuff.
It's another thing the real estate people should be, they should let people know.
Yeah, that's true.
so there's a lot when it comes to, say, like, new construction, when people that are building properties, building houses on the Gunnahook Lake now, or a lot of the newer properties that you can see along the Seabright, so the impounded section of the river, it's like everything's back, and it follows all of that pretty well. There's a lot more gray area with the existing structures that are allowed to be expanded, that already don't have very much of a buffer. They might have a few trees that then are allowed to get cut down because they're some kind of a hazard tree or something, and then they don't get replanted. The expansion of camps from seasonal with no foundation and just people are there a little bit to this year-round thing is a big deal, because you just need zoning board of appeals approval, and you have to show that there's no other practical place to build, or that the bar is, you basically just have to go through and say, I thought about building a little further away from the shore, but that's not going to be feasible because there's a tree that I want to save here, and then, so that's where I see a lot of, and there's nothing to prevent people from putting, like, pesticides, anywhere in a lot of
So
cases.
one of the big ones is septic too.
Septic.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
like, we
huge.
could require septic inspections every time a property gets sold and different stuff like that. But
Lateral lines,
lateral lines,
yeah.
yeah.
There's an ordinance in
What is
Rockland
a
that
lateral line?
What does that mean?
your lateral,
Sorry.
your sewer line going into the main,
Oh, those, okay, yeah,
You're-
now
you're
it's with you. I was like,
most
oh.
places, I mean, for the protection of the person buying the home, as well as the town and the pollution that's associated with it, you want to have something in your ordinance that says when somebody sells a property, the line needs to be inspected and cambered, and if it's damaged, it needs to be repaired before the sale of the property. Because a lot of times they sell these properties, nobody looks at it,
Right,
people buy it, it's root intrusion,
Yep.
all kinds of problems, you're talking $10,000 to fix that,
Oh, easily, yeah.
just like that. So that's put on, the burden's put on the person selling it, or it's resolved before they sell it, so that doesn't get, they don't get stuck with that bill.
right.
That's a no-brainer, that should happen every time. We don't have anything on the books about that.
And all of this, as we know, impacts the soil and water health, and at the
Absolutely.
shoreline is
Oh, yeah.
like crazy, yeah, so
Right.
so
And
this
the
is something we can work
designation
on
of-
over the winter.
Shoreland, like the shoreland zone. We did Camden back when we were just getting this passed. It was a watered down version even for the state, what is going to be part of the shoreland zone. So the stream, all these littler streams are not shoreland. That's
There are a lot of perennial streams or intermittent streams that are not on the old maps, that are
they have no protection really, except for just, and not even perennial, or maybe at one point they were, but these are streams that flow all year long that have no special protections, like the one that goes underneath Belmont Avenue, and the one that goes, but you're just talking about the Lupin Terrace one.
Yep.
Those should be shoreland streams right away, because if you start cutting down all the trees along Cobb Hill and Lupin Terrace, and we already have flooding problems where that stream comes down, it's just gonna be made so much worse.
Right.
Another thing to talk about within shoreline zoning and sort of town ordinances in general is the looking at soils maps. I mean, there's no soil scientist or engineer that's gonna say you should build in, X, Y, and Z soils, but if we don't utilize those soils maps and say X, Y, and Z soils, for example, are no-build zones, whether it's an expansion or whether it's a new build or whether it's a, like they are, they're hydric soils. They are already saturated, and, and I think in those things, those are the things that weren't put in place that we know now that, would add value. So doesn't mean we're gonna put 100 of them, but these are the things to look at, these are the things to address.
Well,
and
that's what
see.
the original Conservation Commission thing was supposed to do, was produce those maps
Right.
that the town was supposed to, and they were supposed to all be in the basement, and people were supposed to. Now we've got computers.
Right.
We can
Well-
have them on the computer.
I viewed them online before.
Yeah.
But updating those,
Nothing
I mean, those can all, a lot of them, when they say, areas of special significance and tidal waiting habitat and all this stuff, it should be updated with more, recent observations of places that peregrine falcons have been seen or different stuff like that. It's all, those beginning with habitat maps.
Yep.
It's all, that, you're right, Edie, that's kind of the stuff that the Conservation Commission is supposed to be making sure all of that
Did you say
stuff
that
gets updated.
a former Conservation Commission person had already done a lot of work on this before?
Which was really, yes, Roger Rittmaster was really focused on getting the Conservation Commission to look at all of Camden and look at the different zones, and we were working on this manual, this waterfront property owners manual that, I'll write him.
I know Roger too, so I can reach out to him.
Because everybody was assigned a chapter, and I can't remember if that got finished or if, yeah, you should ask him about that.
Yeah, I will.
Roger was he's a really smart guy.
This does sound like a good winter project.
Right? I think each one of us could, I
Yeah.
could take soils,
I
and
agree.
you could take this, and you could take, we
Yeah,
could
yeah.
kind of
That sounds
bring it,
great.
and then have a meeting, once we all have accumulated
We
enough
can divide and conquer.
substantive information, bring Jeremy in, and you guys, and say, this would work, or that would work, or this is a priority, and that's never gonna fly, or whatever. The practical sides of, getting something implemented and onto a ballot for spring or fall.
This is a different topic, but
Yeah, no.
I just wanted, I was at a meeting when they were talking about the peer moratorium and stuff. And I just wanted to say, you probably don't hear this a lot, but you guys had a major impact on how that kind of changed the direction of things. You were really successful in what you did, so I just wanted to say that you made a big impact.
And we shouldn't drop the ball going forward.
Exactly, yeah.
No,
There's
Well, I'm
still-
just sharing that with you. I
No,
thought
I
you guys did a
appreciate
good job, and it really, if you guys wouldn't have got involved, I don't think that would have went the way it went. You really had a big impact on that, whether you know it or not.
That's good to know.
Oh, it's a huge thing to be able to say, well, because they said, well, usually the harbor committee looked at it, and then the planning board looked at it, and then the Conservation Commission had a lot of concerns about this and that, and the planning board looked at it more, and it makes, a huge difference.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's good to know. So, all right, so I think that we are in agreement then that we will, I'll send an email out with sort of suggested
Yep.
topics, and, if we can all pounce accordingly, but let's move forward on how to, so this will be a follow-up email for this topic. the Lake Beach, I just called it Lake Beach area, and I just wanted to publicly state, both personally and professionally, that I thought the town did an excellent job handling the situation. I thought that, there was a lot of things that could have gone in a different direction, and everybody dug in and kept calm and carried on, and recognized the severity of the situation, and was respectful of the owners, and is being very conscientious about the adjacent public property. And I thought the questions that the select board raised and the concerns and were just on point, and I really appreciated the efforts made to follow through and just take the time we needed to get it done and to address it well.
It's
So
not really done, because they
well, it's
just,
not totally,
yeah.
but there's more work to be done. There's more,
Have new trees been planted there? So,
Are we, the poisoning?
yeah.
Yes, they did a major, very extensive restoration.
Right.
they removed the soils, they removed the trees.
Well, right now, I just got a dig safe because a company's coming in and they're gonna be doing sampling plots
Right,
Right, at the beach,
at the
along the
beach
beach.
and
Yeah.
on the public property.
Right,
yep,
So it's not,
Good.
they're-
so
Good.
they had a fine levied like $180,000 for they had to pay,
Did
right?
you get to watch the video?
plus the $30,000
$1,000 for the
for
monitoring.
the monitoring.
What happens to that
and
money?
the suit, they had to pay the owner
1.6 million.
$1.6 million.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah,
and then the state was just $4,000, which is
Yeah,
like their largest
$4,500
fine,
from
which
the
is
state.
There's a
a
big
joke.
article, I can send it to you, the local tabloids.
I
But
read
you
it.
see
But they
the
don't,
Daily
they
Mail?
don't, they don't mention that
No
about
way.
the
They
two
have
having,
pictures of it, of
In the-
them and everything.
yeah, it was
Daily
Daily
Mail?
Mail.
Oh, yeah.
I know, but
All
they
right,
don't
well, let's
mention
not go
about
to-
the two of them having an agreement, having settled out of court for this
Wow.
large sum. So altogether, this has cost them over $2 million,
Can you imagine?
No,
or about two.
that's a big,
Yeah.
anyway.
Um,
But with the,
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah, look.
wow.
Daily Mail.
I don't know how they got it, but anyway, it was good to see
You'll
you.
get lots of pop-ups.
So with that, just as a general question, when the town fines somebody, like $180,000 or whatever the fine was, right? What happens with that money? Does it go to
That's a fair question. It's
the
public.
betterment of, like, we use it
You
for,
didn't watch the select board meeting.
I did not.
I know, I said that's exactly where it was,
No,
guys.
you
It's
see,
too painful to watch them when you're
It's
not
supposed to
there.
be
I-
going to a certain little place.
I'm
for
guilty,
trees.
I'm guilty as charged.
Yeah, so what's been talked about in
Well,
the
it was
past.
very interesting.
I watched like
Fascinating.
at least 20 minutes, and then I was like, I have other things I have to do, like, yeah, and it was almost like I had to just like stop.
Well, I told you, that's why I told you where to start to watch that.
Yeah, and you can always put it on double speed.
That's
On
what I
YouTube
do.
has an option.
I do that.
And,
All the time.
and you can put it on in the background and just like,
Yeah,
that's what
I
I do.
think
Or
so.
1.5
Yeah.
speed, 1.75 speed.
Because you can understand it.
Well, it depends who's talking, but but then you can kind of know, oh, this is what I'm interested in this. And you don't have to listen to
No,
the
you
stuff.
did send it around,
But
Barbara.
anyway,
Fascinating.
that's where,
Satisfying.
it was said in the past that money from these types of violations should go to a tree care fund. And this, because years ago, the Conservation Commission was encouraging us to put aside actually a couple $100,000 for emerald ash borer preparedness. And at the time, the select board was like, yeah, we don't have that kind of money right now to be recommending. But whether it be specifically for the emerald ash borer or just for tree, protection,
Maintaining
maintenance,
them.
things to protect trees that the town designates as important, it would be good for us to check and see if that's really happening, because it would be a great way to fund that reserve fund, making making sure that the money for fines is going in there.
This has been like, in the past 3 years, there's been like 3 big fines for tree cutting.
Well, more than, I mean, that was the biggest fine the town has ever assessed.
Yeah, they
But
explained-
we had to use the shoreline zoning ordinance in order to
Yeah.
do it. And so Jeremy had to do so much work to be able to say, okay, well, we're gonna have to say that the trees that died were the result. We had to treat it basically as if the trees had been cut down. There's no special area for poisoning.
Right.
And we had to, the ordinance has to say fines of up to blah, blah, blah per day. And so he actually had to use the existing ordinance as a basis for what fines we were going to be able to defend in court if there hadn't been a settlement. But, that was a negotiated agreement with the property owner. And he had to look at, okay, well, if this ends up going to court, what's the judge going to consider to be reasonable based on what we have in our ordinance?
Right, but he also explained about how initially the bonds came back and said, okay, we'll do 30, and he said, okay, well, if you don't want to do the amount we talked about, you can go in front of the select board and argue it. And they said, okay, we'll just pay 230, because that's what was interesting about, I wanted you guys to watch on the select board, because everybody in the select board was like, is that all? No, it should be way more than that,
Oh,
way more.
yeah, I was
They were
surprised.
people were furious, and they
Oh,
were,
yeah.
and then Jeremy explained how his whole process, and so, anyway, it was interesting. That's why I thought you guys would find it satisfying.
And there was enthusiasm from the select board a little bit about the relooking at the herbicide,
Yes.
pesticide
I
ordinance,
definitely
which
heard that when I
like
watched it.
Marcia Smith, who had been really instrumental in that Citizens for Green Camden, and she wrote me too saying, the town should be looking at that again. It had gotten shot down before as sort of too invasive with property owners, but.
Well, I think it's going to be hard to monitor unless there's a problem, but then if there is a significant problem or damage, we have it on
We have
record and we
something,
can go back to it and use it. It's just, so I can kind of get why it got shoved aside in the past, because it's, Jeremy or nobody's going to be running around and testing everybody's property.
Like so much
Excuse me, which are you spraying? It's like you have to,
Mhm.
yeah, but
What
at
was
least if
good?
something's on.
So much is done by
record.
landscaping companies too, that being able to say to them, you're not allowed to use this, this, and this on camera properties, that I think carries some weight.
So,
This stuff that they use, they don't even sell it around here.
no,
First time it's been.
I'm trying to think about how that all they had to have bought it in another place.
It's a
Missouri, where they
Missouri,
live.
Right, and then put it in their vehicle, and then drive it over here with the intent on you. I mean, there was a lot of thought that went into that, you know what I mean? It's like, wow.
Which is why Tom asked some very specific and pointed questions.
Yeah, I was like, holy smokes.
Yeah.
Tom's really great on this issue.
Yeah, he didn't hold back his,
That was even in the public part. There's been a whole executive session too, asking questions about this.
so, welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, hi.
So we're now just wrapping up the conversation on the tree poisoning incident adjacent to Lake Beach. And shoreline zoning was just before that, and we've collectively agreed that we would kind of take that on in terms of helping bolster the protections on a local level. And I would send out an email and make sort of topic suggestions or towns that I already know that we could look towards for as a model that have additional score. And that once we did a little bit of homework and we kind of got some data and some information and some direction based on what we have here, that we would bring Jeremy and Shenley in for a meeting and talk about how to get something maybe on the spring ballot to support some additional protections for all of our water resources. And then we were, the other thing that came up, and I wish Pamela was here, so I'll start the conversation, but we'll revisit it. So I think at this point, everybody probably knows, but I'll restate it. So my professional background is in design and planning, and Pamela is also a landscape designer. And so some quiet conversations, which are, you know, happily made public, is maybe where we could help use those skills to improve, not just the aesthetics, but best practices. And with the Lake Beach, both the tree poisoning and my own long time, sort of the land use and the parking and the access and the shoreland and others and the excess lawn. And I mentioned to her a couple months ago, like, hey, would you be interested in doing a design with me, collaborating on a design that we would basically give to the town? That would be just, here's an option anyways, take it or leave it, but
For where?
for the Lake Beach, for some improvements with vegetated buffers, maybe a sample rain garden, a reduction of lawn, so that, you know, improve the buffers overall.
You know where a place that also needs it, I don't want to just throw it
Yeah,
out
no,
there,
I'm listening.
is Shirt Tail Point.
So we're laughing because we had to talk about a few things, so we looked at
We'll do
Lake.
that one for free. but-
I might
You know
go
what
with them.
Shirt Tail used to have?
So-
It had low bush blueberries that everybody picked. Whereas
Did they
grass,
really?
yeah, they just wiped it out.
But it's all like eroding right near the edge of the shore.
So, okay, well, you
Because
know,
of the dam,
maybe
but,
one or the other, but like, so thinking about the climate action funding, thinking about, you know, really highly visible, highly used, and Shirt Tail is certainly used, but Lake Beach is like really wide, you know, really visible for both locals and like, that we could do, you know, a whole like interpretive signage and best practices, and it doesn't have to be like over the top, but it would be an aesthetic improvement, right? I think most people would agree when it was done, like there would be an aesthetic improvement, could be parking improvement, like safer, better parking, and actually.
I don't think anything like that's been looked at over there.
And I just think there's enormous possibilities. I think it's a great space, and it's just a little green gem within, you know, the greater community, and it's used by so many, but it's almost like there's so much more potential there, and there's so much opportunity to do a better job with erosion and sedimentation and native plants and pollinator habitat, and like all of these things are being widely funded right now. And I think, gosh, you know, we have a really supportive select board and a planning board that seems to be like pretty active and engaged in the, you know, the Conservation Commission. I just thought we'd be silly not to attempt to address a number. Bayview Street has a lot of water and potential, you know, we could mitigate some of the flow.
There's a lot of water that runs through that park.
A lot of water.
Yeah.
And so I just thought,
That'd be a
is
good
that,
spot for rain garden type of
right?
thing. Where we're kind yeah.
So that's another sort of project that has
Great if
been
you
kind
could
of in
fix
my
those
mind.
stairs, that's pretty.
Those were fixed.
Well,
Well, it's a little better now, but it's still not quite there yet.
I actually included this I gave a presentation at the Coastal Conference in Saco a couple months ago about private structures and public access and how erosion control along the coast is basically damaging public access, and we're inadvertently fighting against ourselves. And this is what I dug up some old pictures of Lake Beach, and these stairs were there before, and then this was considered this major improvement where they riprap it and they put in more stairs. Then just a couple years ago, we redid the stairs, and what's interesting is there's this little area over here where there's one little tiny area where the shoreline hasn't been messed with.
Can
And
you share your screen in the Zoom?
Sorry, Sam.
That's okay.
That's a reasonable
just
request.
imagine it, Samantha.
Thank you.
And so what I learned through the conference also is that when you have these walls, it causes the waves to hit and then deflect, and then the energy goes back down and pulls more sand away from the shore constantly. And so
I I don't see anything, sorry.
Oh, you don't?
It just says you started screen sharing.
No.
Oh.
Hold on.
It's okay if it doesn't work. I just thought I'd try one more time.
I'll just, what if I,
Oh yeah, there it is.
okay. So it makes, more and more sand pull away. And in southern Maine, they've realized a long time ago that their beaches are really important. And so they've stopped all this. They don't let people build walls because they know that it cuts off all of the sediment that's supposed to provide beach area, and then it just makes it all worse. But here we haven't quite figured it out yet, and we keep developing this, we keep trying to make more and more walls and then better stairs to get down. But people are now trying to, with their kayaks and stuff, they go around onto the neighbor's property because it's this nice little path. And it goes through here, I'll show you here, you come along through here and it just kind of winds through this gently sloping forested buffer. And the neighbors have had to put up something saying, stay off, this is private property. But it's so alluring to people to get down that way. It would be great if we could sort of expand that and say, here we have an example of this nature-based solution. If we want to save, do we care about the actual beach at Lake Beach, or do we just care about trying to protect this like grassy precipice? But there's just so much money available for doing things better, especially if you can make it a nature-based solution. So
I have a question. So you said that southern Maine doesn't use these, southern Maine, I know it's like a giant swath of, there's a lot, that's a huge coastline there, but I'm curious, what do they do instead of the walls? Do they remove the walls entirely so that?
Yeah, so the coastal, they have rules about anything within the coastal sand dune system. So they just don't, you can repair your existing wall, but you just can't build anything new.
Who's they?
What's that?
Who's they?
Some of the coastal towns.
Yeah, like
Many of the southern coastal towns have adopted,
and I think it's actually a statewide ban on like any building structures in the coastal sand dune system. So one of the things that Pete Slavinsky had said, the Maine State geologist, is that he wishes they would expand that, and that some towns have to coastal bluffs as well, which is what we have a lot of.
Would this have been considered a coastal bluff?
Yes, and you can see on some of our, like in Sherman's Cove, we have a lot of this coastal, this is over by the Curtis Island overlook. This is an eroding coastal bluff that's had all this rock put here, but it made me think of what you were saying, Rebecca, with the soil maps and the state does all of these things where they put out maps of where there are unstable coastal bluffs or partially unstable coastal bluffs, and then you're not allowed to do things like build walls there sometimes, or it becomes part of the planning process. But we're just a little late on recognizing, okay, well, what's sort of special about our coastline, and what are we trying to protect? Because if you're going to try to just protect this house here, what's happened is that there's 80 feet here. This is like another Lake Beach, really, that the public owns. We have 80 feet here. And if you didn't have all of this wall here, you would have eroding sand, which would be a beach. So anyway.
Is there, paired with that understanding, is there a recommendation or a recognition of what would be best for Lake Beach? Or is it, you have to prioritize, you have to figure out what you're prioritizing and then figure out the recommendation from there?
Yeah, I think that's part of what, like with properties that the town owned, we really have an opportunity to say, well, what is it here that we know that the sea is rising, we know this, all these things, what are we trying to protect? And then if Rebecca and Pamela and whoever else could do a design that says, okay, these are the things that this design would help
Yeah.
protect.
Interesting.
Because when we're doing it reactively, we're like, oh no, the steps, that's the only way we can get down here, and so we do
We have
this.
that, so we just do that,
Right,
as
and
opposed to
looking at the
having to
whole
do a
thing.
serpentine path with permeable surface instead of impervious surface.
Right.
Or if we have to do a paved, why is that the best practice, because of, certain angle or slope or whatever.
I would love a serpentine path down there, as it is that, even that walkway from the parking lot just to the steps is really steep.
What's a serpentine path?
Oh, like
Sorry, I don't
snakes.
know. Oh, okay. Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Sorry.
I just have, no, it's okay. I'm curious, like within that design, like, could it be like large enough that, and just, excuse me, if this is like a simple question, but like, you would eliminate the stairs and completely and
Possibly.
totally turn? The other thing about the stairs is you have accessibility issues.
That is not a handicap accessible site in
Yeah.
general. So
It's
like,
barely
and that path, there is no ADA compliance code
Yeah.
officer that's gonna say that paved path down to the stairs is compliant. You can't get down, I'm not discounting that, getting anybody down there that wants to, but the reality is the toe slope and the,
Is it danger?
it's,
Those rocks, it's all put there. But it's like the stairs, it creates additional problems because we've built this wall that you now need to get down. In places where you just have a more naturally eroding, erosion is a natural thing that creates our beaches, and you still aren't gonna get a wheelchair necessarily down through the sand trap, but you can slide down safely, when you sit down, and it's like, what's the value of these structures? The more structures we create, the more structures we have to create to get over and around them. And in some places, we'll always need that, like the public landing and we're gonna have to have deep water access and boats are gonna pull up, but in a park, what are we trying to accomplish with these walls?
That public landing got decimated. Did you see it? Over at Sherman's
Oh, Steamboat Landing, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I filmed that yesterday.
It's kind of comical, because I've been saying we shouldn't be messing with that. We keep on fixing. I keep on telling the harbor master that we're putting the wrong thing back there, and that's why it keeps on falling apart.
The motion is a mighty force.
Yeah, it flips those big concrete things around like they're nothing.
Rag dolls.
Yeah.
But this seems like, to go back to the Lake Beach.
Yep.
It seems like there's a lot of benefits, including the armoring, rejigging, but the parking, the visual appeal, the education, the rain garden thing. There's a lot of benefits.
Yeah, there would be reduction in maintenance for the property over time. It would be improvements for parking, accessibility.
Well, it's even crazy. You park your
picnicking, et
car.
cetera. There's a lot of different things that can be.
You park your car on the hill, and we go there all the time. And it's like, what happens if the car, if the emergency brake doesn't work, or it's like,
You're sliding into the ocean.
it's scary.
Really, it's like short tail. You really shouldn't be like trying to get down. The
No, you need to parking needs to
should
go
be at the top.
It needs to be
yeah.
tiered in 2
Right.
or 3 tiers, and then the
And
current
then
parking
just
lot
make
needs to be
more.
a bigger,
Yeah,
it needs to be created.
Exactly.
parking should be by the
Water.
road. You know what I mean?
Well, yes and no, yeah, that would be a little more challenging on Bayview, but we can, that's like
Right.
a
It's like
subcommittee.
we don't have to get as close to the water as possible with the
Right.
parking, that's
Or
the,
That's
they-
the issue.
they can
Keep on trying to
ensure
put
the
the
water
parking
is possible.
right to the water.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation with you, like at Shirt Tail.
Unfortunately, I'm not in charge of Lake Beach.
Oh, that's true, you got the.
Yeah,
Who is?
but,
Who is?
Parks and Recreation.
That's Parks and Rec at Shirt Tail too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, well, there's
Yeah.
opportunity there. All right. So,
anything's possible.
I think the best thing to do is like to put that in front of Audra.
Let's,
um,
I think we can come up with designs without,
Well, I know, but when you
you're
get
in charge of paving. and not paving, and trees.
Oh,
Didn't you
dear.
plant the tree?
Huh?
Did you plant the replacement tree?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Two.
All right, well, I'm going to leave the conversation about a potential park improvements for more discussion next month, but it sounds like there's at least some interest and motivation behind that, and I
I
will
think you
reach,
should just get going, just start.
just do it, just do
Just-
it.
I mean, I can help you with it. I mean, I'm gonna be involved no matter
And
what.
then we'll show it to.
All right, and I'll make sure Pamela knows she's on the hook. She was more than happy, but I'll let her know that we are going to move forward. But I think I'll reach out to Parks and Rec, and maybe not yet, just do a whole design.
I mean, they've got the snow we'll worry about right now.
I
so.
know, there's plenty to deal with.
But I can say, I'll say at the select board meeting that the Conservation Commission is looking at it, because it's only a matter of time before the next crisis where, does everybody remember when you really couldn't get down those stairs and we had to have the caution tape?
Yes.
I do, yeah.
And it was very recent, and it was very expensive, and so that's just gonna keep happening. And when we don't have a design ready to go or anything, then we can't really do anything other than a reactive, like, let's just try to fix the stairs as they are, because then it's a DEP permit by rule situation, because you're just fixing things the way they are. So getting ahead of this and starting to say, well, we've looked at, this other design would allow us to, if we had a concept design, we could get grants, we could.
Yep, okay.
So,
I have a question, so I don't know the answer to this, so you armor it like we did at Lake Beach with the boulders. I mean, if you took that away, could you replace it with like
Vegetation,
gravel, or like, not gravel, but like beach material?
vegetation and erosion control mulch and.
So it's steep like this and you vegetate it, or do
you
you?
could put more
do you
sand, you could
taper
do
That's what I'm
beach
asking.
nourishment like they do in other
That's what
places
I'm, I mean,
too.
wouldn't you wanna like take it down at a slower taper so that you're kind of like replicating what's gonna happen naturally, but then it wouldn't take away from what's behind it? You know what I mean? Because you're shoring up the toe of the slope.
Mhm.
Right now you have this, you know, if you shore up the toe of the slope, like right here, and then you gradually build it up, I would think that would create a more natural type of, and then you vegetate it.
Yep.
But you can't just vegetate this, because it's just gonna get undermined all the time. But it's a question, I don't know the answer to that, but,
There's multiple approaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, but basically you are correct.
right, that seems like that would make sense. If you're gonna take away a wall, you'd wanna kind of shore it up with a kind of wedge almost.
Oh. What kind of a wedge?
Material, you'd use natural, what would have normally been there from natural erosion, you just put it back, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the adjacent property, and I know you can't immediately put in like that big tree, tiny tree, little, like, but the adjacent property has evolved naturally. And, but we've been so focused for years on dredging sand out of the harbor, and they usually take it like far, far away. It would be, one of the things they're doing in southern Maine is taking, like, they purchased a dredge, and they're just moving sand. So
Yeah.
it gets pushed out into other places, and then they hose it back into the beach areas,
Right,
which could be a,
you take it out of the harbor and put it over there.
right,
Yeah.
maybe.
All right, so is there another update on the Mid-Coast solid waste situation? I know that came up in the last meeting. I know there's not a lot that we necessarily are doing, but it's certainly an
Yeah.
active topic.
We approved the board approved the contract to go forward with leachate management solutions to begin the process, but we organized the.
I think I told them last time, I gave them a whole update on where we were gonna send our trash. So that might be what, yeah, but
Well, like, both of them are relevant, so,
No,
yeah.
so, well, the first one is the treating of the leachate.
Yep.
We have a company looking into it, and we sequenced that so that they were gonna do the interaction with the state agencies first to see if there's like any fatal flaws before they start developing and building something.
Yep.
So they signed a contract, they authorized the contract for that, so we should start seeing something come up from that. The trash locations for disposal in front of the board, and there was some questions on the way the contract language was with the MRC and the company that is going to be managing the old fiber operation. So we put in some questions to that contract to get some more explanation on it, because some of that stuff was a little vague and we had questions on it. So the other option was the waste management option, which doesn't really change anything. But what's happened, which recently happened, is the park plant, which is another place that we used to send our trash to years ago.
Incinerator.
It's incinerator, correct.
We've sent it all to the landfill now for anybody that.
Right. We're landfilling everything. This would be an incinerator. Perk sold out. It was owned by USA Energy, and another company purchased it and changed the name to Grace, and they're gonna be up and running and start taking contracts pretty soon. So there might be a third option now all of a sudden that might be better than the other two, or better than one anyway. So that's kind of nice in a way. So we're waiting to see what happens with that, and then hopefully maybe that could be another thing.
But the facility itself will stay intact, like the recycling is still gonna go to the same, like, we're not closing down
No.
that space or anything.
Ours?
Yeah.
Landfill or the.
Nothing's closing at our place.
Yeah. The landfill, so, well, we are filling that hole pretty quickly.
What's the name of the group that we decided to join again?
We didn't decide to.
Oh, you didn't?
We're
We're
still,
just still in a
Still in
holding pattern.
negotiation.
we're a year away from the contract expiring, so we're
Oh,
trying to.
okay.
We're not in like in crisis mode where we need to make a decision right off, but this third option that's now viable might be another alternative, which is better than
We used to send
landfill.
our trash.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
but the
If
land,
you like incinerating things into the air,
but the recycling part, that's not gonna change. Right now, we broker our recycling, we send it to wherever we can, where they give us the most money for it.
Yep.
That's kind of how we do it now.
Okay.
And anything else you can ask her, because she's been telling me more than me, so.
oh, we compete for that title sometimes.
There was more tree clearing. That's, like, has some community concern with the Greenfield subdivision tree clearing and.
more?
Well, I mean,
I
more
didn't-
into the last,
yeah.
yeah, I went by, it's just, maybe the piles have been moved around, but it looked substantive. So my question is, this is, was this is a violation of the subdivision as granted or as permitted, or?
I don't have any updates on that since the
Okay.
last time. That would be a Jeremy question. Basically figuring out whether DEP is going to enforce the violation of the approved subdivision stormwater, whatever, with the 50-foot buffer of trees. And then there's also that whole subdivision abuts the Midco Solid Waste property, actually. And they have a failed stormwater pond that is very similar, actually, to the Lupin Terrace situation in some ways. Except for no sediment migration that we know of, and basically the thing that sews all those together is probably all of these common areas of these subdivisions that have the common areas or the undeveloped areas are part of the stormwater plan, and that's why the projects were approved, because they're going to have these undeveloped areas or stormwater mitigation areas. When the town has accepted the roads for these places, we take over caring for the roads, but in most cases, we haven't realized we also need to take over the common areas and the stormwater part of it. So like all the catch basins on those roads that we take over generally drain to some kind of a stormwater pond that was engineered for that purpose. And when you take over the road from a private subdivision, make it a public road, the people there are generally happy. They don't have to pay to maintain it or plow it anymore. And then
benefit to the town for taking over the road in the first place?
What's that?
What's the benefit to the town for even taking over the road?
There isn't one. I mean,
Thank you.
Well, if you're trying to increase development, maybe I could think of, public access in a lot of cases. Especially when they're not just like a little cul-de-sac that, like, people can walk on Linden Lane right now and through the Greenfield subdivision. That's a benefit. But we have many of them. We should be taking over this is something Jeremy brought up years ago, and I didn't understand it at first, but we should probably be taking over the common areas and all of that as well. Otherwise, the homeowners association that initially formed to share the cost of the road, they generally forget about other obligations once they no longer have to meet to pay for a road. And so that's what's happened over at Linden Lane.
I was wondering if you knew on the Greenfield, like, who sold that piece of property? Could it ever have been a lot?
Which one?
Who?
The one in the Chestnut Street?
On the corner of Chestnut and Greenfield. I mean, who sold that? The people who bought it and thought they could do all the things weren't told what the rules were. I mean, was it even a lot? Who sold it?
It was a lot, yeah. It was as part of the approved subdivision plan, I believe probably the original developer. I'm sure there's different amounts of blame to be assigned to different people. The town, in terms of the stormwater pond there, the town voted back in 2007 to authorize the select board to negotiate the transfer of that whole parcel to the town as part of a pathways easement there. Eventually, there is supposed to be there's this old rock road that goes from the Greenfield subdivision all around the back of the landfill at the transfer station, then back along the Y property, and all along Lily Pond to Lime Rock Street in Rockport. It's a full historic rock road that there was supposed to be this path through, and years ago, actually the Rockport Conservation Commission is in charge of overseeing this easement on their side for this wildlife preservation area behind the Y. But years ago, the Midcoast Solid Waste Board shot it down because they didn't want people walking behind the landfill because of all the fires and problems we're having with DEP, or they were having with DEP. So hopefully we could revisit all of that, take over the common area of the Greenfield subdivision, fix the stormwater pond, use it as a public path and educational opportunity, and also treat our leachate in an environmentally sustainable way rather than just pumping it to the treatment plant and having it overflow the aqua. But,
That sounds cool.
Yeah, sounds real cool.
Yeah.
So the next item on the agenda is to let everyone know that there's a peer workshop on Thursday, December 7th at 5 p.m. via Zoom. I do not yet have the link, but I will, and then I will forward it out to everybody. Jeremy let me know that Harbor Committee, Planning Board, a number of people, powers that be, or people, parties of interest will be on that, and it's really to sort of look at that peer moratorium, look at the recommendations, and look at kind of how to move ahead appropriately, I guess.
yeah, and I would say more specifically, the planning board now is recommending no more private piers in the outer harbor and the coastal harbor, but as part of that moratorium, there's also a moratorium on wharves, private breakwaters, bulkheads, things like that. And so they have also recommended that there not be any more of those. And except for in cases where there's potentially a structure that's in some kind of emergency situation. And it would be a good time for the Conservation Commission to maybe renew the letter that was sent before, which was really very, very gently worded. I would think try to support, the planning board really looked into the stuff about the walls and the damage to adjacent properties when one one property puts up a seawall, they have really been trying to look at it from a public interest standpoint, and I think clearly learned a lot. And it would be good to try to support those recommendations, and then also try to think about, like, okay, in cases where you're saying that maybe a bulkhead could be put in to protect a house that's falling into the ocean, you know, what would that really look like? If you start looking at some of the properties there, how, you know, at what point would it really be detrimental to the public beach area if somebody were allowed to build like a fortress out in front of their property? Or, and because you really do see it in other places where houses have gotten so close to the ocean that they've been then allowed to build up walls sort of almost around the house. And it's, do we want,
like into the intertidal zone.
oh yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of the houses are already kind of sitting in the intertidal zone.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's, the whole pier thing has turned into a larger conversation, and that's been really frustrating to some people because they thought it should just be a quick and easy thing, that what's the big harm if a few more people build a few more piers? But I think the planning board has, you know, kind of correctly seen that there is a much larger issue here about shoreland planning, and it would be good if we could participate in that.
Should we look at our letter and maybe revamp it a little bit to?
I would think so. It should be responsive to what the current, because that letter was just a letter suggesting that the harbor committee look at a few more things.
Yeah.
I went to a joint meeting between the planning board and the harbor committee the other day, and I don't think I did a good job of sort of explaining things, because I got really nervous, actually. It was not a warm and fuzzy environment. And I thought the planning board did a really great job of sort of saying, you know, we're looking at this as, like, looking at it as, like, what's the public benefit here? What's the public interest? And the harbor committee, I don't think it spent much time kind of thinking about, like, public uses of walking along the shoreline. And it was I found it to be pretty uncomfortable there, but I think it would be worth looking at our letter again.
What's the, just two quick questions. Where does the letter live? And, like, just in order to look at it. And the second one is, what's the goal of the workshop, and, like, who's gonna be there?
You may be able to answer a little better than I, you might have said it, but, yeah, go ahead. And
Yeah, so the letter is, a while back, when we
I
passed
have
this
the letter, I'll send it to you.
moratorium on new piers and breakwaters and all that stuff. And then the harbor committee and the planning board were tasked with looking at the ordinance to make recommendations and changes. Basically, the harbor committee came back with a few recommendations about allowing people to build them higher, but didn't recommend any new, like, prohibitions on new piers or anything. And so then the planning board looked at it. The planning board is an actual, it's not just a committee, it actually has authority and to hold public hearings and review the zoning ordinance and all that. So at the planning board public hearing, they got a bunch of feedback from this group, from the Historic Resources Committee, from just some members of the public, saying that they really should be looking at not allowing any more private piers. The planning board held a couple different workshops, thought about that, and ultimately agreed and said they didn't, you know, agree with the harbor committee's recommendations, or they agreed with some of them, but wanted to in addition, prohibit new private residential, not commercial, but new private residential piers. And then that came back to the select board. The select board has changed during this time, and I think there's a variety of different opinions on the select board. Sophie's the liaison to the harbor committee and feels like, well, the harbor committee did a good job with their recommendations and we should just go with what they said. the planning board recognized that they, unlike the harbor committee, they don't need to just be like tasked by the select board to do something. They make recommendations about the zoning ordinance, and independently of whether the select board asks them to do that or not. So they said, okay, well, we came up with our own thoughts. And so now it's a question of what is gonna go out to voters. And Jeremy is crafting an ordinance based on the planning board's recommendations. But because there's kind of frustration between one committee saying, well, we thought this, and why aren't you listening to this? And then the select board is a little confused. The agreement has been that, okay, well, we're gonna have another workshop where everybody gets to say what their concerns might be. One of the things that's come up is like, what's gonna be the impacts to tax revenue if we don't allow more piers, things like that.
Are you kidding me?
So your reaction is similar to mine, but then there are other people that are like, wow, that's a really good point. We should look into that, because, so different people have thought about this more or less, and.
That reminds me of, that reminds me of Don't Look Up, and they're like, can we make money off of this meteorite that's coming towards us? Sorry.
Yeah, so the harbor committee was very clear they were looking at through a different lens. And I felt like they all were looking at me like I was a environmental lunatic. Whereas the planning board had read some of the same articles maybe that I've read. And there are answers so then after this workshop, there's supposed to be something that can get written up that says, this is what the ordinance would do. If you have an existing pier, you could rebuild it if it falls down under these circumstances, and
provided you clean up all the debris.
right, like that's the type of commentary that would be really useful to say, like because for instance, when that one at the yacht club fell down next to the yacht club, there was apparently nothing that demanded that the people clean it up. And different things like that. So I think that December 7th, is that when it is, December 7th?
Yes. 5 o'clock.
That's supposed to be the workshop, maybe to end all workshops, or to because each committee has felt like the harbor committee said, well, all of our meetings were public and anybody could have provided public input there, and people didn't come in and say all of these things. And then other people are saying, well, that wasn't the time we were supposed to provide public input. The planning board held a public hearing and all these people showed up, and the harbor committee's like, what? No, it's just.
But I was going to try to go to a harbor committee meeting, and I looked on the town website for when the next meeting was, but unbeknownst to me, they changed it to a day before at a different time.
And they did that several times.
And there was no notice on the town website, so I had it on my calendar to go like whatever on a Wednesday. It turned out to be on a Tuesday. And the day before, I was like, oh, they've already had it. But so it really wasn't that.
It's also really different. It's a difficult time for some people, but it's
no. I'm
it's
just
also
saying.
not.
That's what I was saying. It was
right. Yeah.
Really hard.
Committees there's a difference of opinion sometimes about whether committees should be the ones that are soliciting public input or whether that's supposed to happen in the select board. Nobody ever knows when they're supposed to participate, including me as a moving target. Yeah. Probably nobody's doing this on purpose.
I don't understand even why the harbor committee was tasked with looking into this. I mean, they don't really, yes, piers are on the harbor, but that's not really the things that they do. I mean, this is definitely more of a planning board, and much more to do with.
And the problem is that both the harbor ordinance and the zoning ordinance address piers. So the ordinances have to be consistent, and this is where Jeremy has had trouble. Okay, the harbor committee made recommendations for changes to the harbor ordinance, and those now need to be consistent with the zoning ordinance. So when he went to tell the planning board, okay, your job is just to change the zoning ordinance so it's consistent with the harbor committee's recommendations, the planning board said, we don't know if we like this. Right. So now it's, both, there is overlapping jurisdiction. And then I said, well, what about the Conservation Commission? This relates to them. And then even the Historic Resources Committee felt like, what is the historic natural shoreline? There's this whole natural historic National Natural Historic Landmarks program that can identify areas of like special significance for their natural beauty, and probably this whole area between Curtis Island and the state park on the outer coastal harbor has no piers right now. It's all just 100% natural coastline. And they really felt like it's definitely that is worth protecting. And that was something that the planning board was like, wow, yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of cooks in the kitchen.
a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah, this is why nothing ever gets done.
So speaking of trying to get things done, and a lot of cooks in the kitchen, complications,
Yeah.
how is the Camden Conservation Commission gonna have a web presence? And maybe that's a conversation that'll have to be revisited based on the time for the
Did we
next
talk about this
meeting.
last
We
time?
did talk about
Did.
this.
Yeah, we
right?
did.
And it's not on the agenda.
Oh, is it?
I put
It's
it,
not on the agenda, I'm gonna say.
today? Today. Isn't it between peer workshop and trio?
Oh, I do see the word website, I didn't know that's what it meant, okay.
I was like, I think it is.
Okay,
But,
sorry.
I think somebody's supposed to, this is where like a smaller committee of us
Yeah, I.
could make a list of, wasn't Brian,
Yeah,
somebody was
and,
supposed to make a,
Sam, I guess, I was gonna create a wiring diagram, which I haven't done yet,
okay,
that would try to create a high-level structure of what it might look like.
mhm,
That's our website. Given the fact, though, that there's information scattered all over the place, including Dave's got some great stuff on the DPW website, and Parks and Recreation has some cool stuff.
so we could create links to them.
right, that was the
Exactly.
idea.
Just
Okay.
create
From our
hot links to
Conservation
it.
Commission page, create links to all the things that we
And
think.
so you almost didn't know that's where you went. So it was like, you know. it
How's it
was-
gonna be funded? Like, who's gonna pay for the?
Oh, well, so, I mean, really, it's, the town has a website and the Conservation Commission has a page, and if you just say, these are all the things that we want on there,
Updated or added, or, okay,
yeah, we can do all that in, sort of like in bulk.
okay.
We can't, what they can't do is,
Have 5 members, send them 7
Different
different
things.
things.
yeah,
Six
like you're not gonna
Yeah.
get like a redesigned, like,
No,
you know, we want this, we want text wrap here, and we want all of this.
No.
If you want that, you can look at creating, you know, your own website on Google Sites or something that links.
I don't think
But
we
there's
need to do
plenty
that.
that's already there that just could be linked.
Yeah,
So-
there
Yeah,
is.
like, it's still, it's a little updated, doesn't have, but, and it does have some, like, Emerald Ash Forest
Like
stuff and things
Louise's
like that.
reports
Yes.
on your website. The ash tree, emerald ash borer, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's a great report, right?
some of those links are broken.
Mhm.
Yeah, I navigated around and it looked, to me, it looked pretty solid, but, you know,
Needs some work.
yeah, they all always.
Well, but
need work.
there are plenty of things that are already on the website that just need to be linked.
It's of value, right?
Mhm.
So is there,
So it sounds like there's a couple people that are.
Yeah, right, and I'll confess I own that one and I haven't done anything with it yet,
That's-
so.
Or do we want a smaller, like an actual assigned committee of people that want to work on that?
Yeah, you too.
I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe,
Okay.
yeah.
That'd be great.
You said that there is an existing page for
Yeah.
the commission. I looked and I couldn't find it,
I'll send
which
it to you right
feels
now.
like part of the
I
twenty.
still have it open.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that kind of thing, like how could we prevent that, or how would we make
Yeah.
it, you can,
I think that's a thing where,
yeah.
once you have things nested, they're in the ether. They don't exist basically because they're so hard to get to, so I definitely, yeah, we can work.
yeah, and it's okay to have multiple ways to get to the same information.
Right.
Sure,
Sure.
yeah.
You gotta get over the fact that there needs to be one huge clean way to do everything, because that's never gonna happen, right?
Is there a person, and I think I asked this last time, but, Allison, I don't think I didn't ask you. Is there like a person who manages the website, or like the town website, or is it a smattering of people? Is it like on lockdown?
Uh,
Curious.
it's, Yes. No.
Yes,
Mix
so
of-
that-
That's an area, so Janice and Audra, basically do that.
Yeah,
I think I can log in and change things
Yeah.
some if, like if there were a bigger thing, but it's a deficit of it. There isn't somebody that's like the guru of it that loves it and is constantly working to improve it. We did a major rebuild a few years ago with this company called Revise, to make it easier for more people to be able to make changes to it, and that's been both successful and unsuccessful. I think Caitlin can do some stuff with, she posts stuff for the assessing.
okay. There's no like communications person.
No, but it's something that comes up a lot as a real deficit for the town, and it's prevented us for years, as BD knows, from having a newsletter that goes out.
Every time something is suggested in my presence, there's a kind of back off here feeling about the whole thing.
I had voting questions during the voting week and couldn't find answers on the website or on the Facebook page, and that's when I was like, this is a real thing that maybe should be brought up to someone else.
You know what, and speaking of which, the budget,
Sorry.
no, it really is, and there's a difference of opinions about whether the town is like at the level where we should have more proactive communication. There's the small town camp and the more like a city camp. And so we always fund things just like kind of right in the middle where everybody feels like they're stretched too far. So we try to manage citizen expectations by having somebody do like a little bit more or having somebody a little bit part-time or, but so when things like, oh, we should have a newsletter that goes out that talks all about the election, and that ends up being something that like Audra, really, there aren't that many people that know enough about everything that they could take that on, and so it's going to be one more thing for Audra to do, and that's where Beauty feels the like back off kind of thing.
Sure.
What we've talked about in the past is, and Audra said, the town needs to decide, do we care enough about these things that we want to fund like a full position, because we can't continue to ask everybody to take on a little bit more. And the budget committee this year, we're supposed to be involving more of the town committees to be sort of advocating to the budget committee to help them prioritize what should be recommended to the select board. So it would be those people who feel like the town should really invest in some more communication. Because what continues to come up is people will have an idea and they'll say that there's so many smart people in this town, somebody could volunteer to do it. Well, that's what we hear a lot. And it's upsetting and tiring to Audra, because
The communications
there
director
isn't,
for a community is a valid use
all of
of
these volunteers
public
take a
funds.
lot of time
Yeah.
from town staff too.
It's huge.
And so
Big job.
it's not always value added to have, sometimes the volunteers are like,
more
are
work.
taking more time than,
Yeah.
it takes a lot to sort out who can do things. And
Yeah.
anyway, so advocating for
Yeah.
that to be like a funded thing that the town does would be.
I volunteer the garden club.
All right, in the interest of time, I would prefer we table the tree app, since we basically know that we need a little bit more training, a little bit more, or a walkthrough, and we could just put that on the agenda, or we could create a separate time.
Let's create a
to
separate
make-
time to talk
separate
about it. Because
Yeah.
I did follow
Yeah.
up with, I had the meeting with Caitlin
Yeah.
and Dave and
Perfect.
Audra and.
Yeah, no, because so there's obviously, we want to move forward with that, but I think it does need to be its own little thing or a separate.
And an assignment from everybody that has been using it, if you could write down bullets,
Quirky.
list of issues with the current system and desires.
Send that to you?
Yes.
Awesome.
We'll send it
And
to
copy
Dave.
Dave. You can.
I'm staring at you. Did you see how I did that? And
I
send it?
I saw you.
Well, he's gonna be
Well,
involved, but,
Yeah, he's gotta be
Samantha Morlock, do you have
involved, but I
anything
mean,
you
I
want to
think-
share or add before we sign off?
Well, I actually did meet with the school sustainability, the school, I know, it's for the first time, it's not on the agenda.
I know, leave it to me.
We met, there's not a lot to report. They're really focused on their sustainability component of their strategic plan and a digital system they have for tracking how each school is performing in different sustainability areas. It's interesting, but not particularly needing of action or conversation at this point in time. So we could always talk about it at our next meeting. That would be my other question though, is are we planning to meet on December 27th? I know I'll be traveling that day. I don't know if other people have holiday stuff going on, or I might just have to miss it.
I feel like we always say, oh yeah, let's go ahead and meet, but then we get close to it and everybody's like, oh, this is.
Well, do you
Then we
want
have a
to
party.
move it off until the first of the
We'll have a
January?
Christmas party meeting
I could meet, but should we move it up
at
one?
Barb's house.
Should we do it at the 20th? Are you suggesting the 20th?
No,
move
the
it-
3rd?
Oh, the
January 3rd.
Oh, I see, okay.
Well,
Yeah,
then we could maybe for 2024 have all of our meetings on the first Wednesday of the month. Might make life easier.
it might, and I won't say yay or nay at this point, other than to say I'm happy to move it to the 3rd and
I think
have
that
it as an
makes sense.
agenda item to revisit
The third,
Yeah,
whether we meet on the last
that's
Wednesday or the
gonna be
first.
a tricky day, the 27th.
Okay,
yeah.
all right, so, thank you, that was very important, and it saved us a lot of juggling by email
Yeah.
in another couple of weeks, so, excellent. All right, thanks, everybody, and
Well,
I will call the meeting
Have a
adjourned.
good holiday.
Yeah.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
I can't believe it's already here.
Stuff again.
Oh, my.
Closing in on us
Send them
quick.
out,
It's
wish list
crazy.
to Allison.
Yeah, I gotta
I
work,
got
I
it
gotta.
this week.
Well, it's probably because
Started
fall
that
just
master.
came. We didn't have fall, we just
No, I
had,
started that master.
Yeah,
and then suddenly we're in it.
we went from the monsoon to the winter.
I love it.
The beginning is the most amount of material.
It's fun.
And I do think
I'll
so
sit
many
there and
things